welcome to EDU597. My name is Janice Wallace and I'm going to be your instructor in this course, Gender and Educational Leadership. As you might imagine, given the title of the course, that we're going to be talking about gender as it relates to the practices of leaders in schools and school systems. Now I'm thinking about leadership quite broadly in the sense that teachers are certainly leaders in their schools and in their school communities. Administrators are leaders both by formal position and within their schools and school communities and so on. So each of you is considered a leader in a particular kind of way and in a particular kind of context. And as such, you have the responsibility and the opportunity to think through how gender is implicated in the kinds of things that happen in the school setting that you find yourself. And so as we move our way through this course, we're going to be considering various kinds of ways in which that happens, both for boys and girls, men and women. And so I hope that as we move through the course, we're going to have a really excellent opportunity to talk about sometimes difficult questions, but we can do that in a meaningful and respectful way, and everyone will come away from the experience having learned a great deal and thinking about how that has implications for their own practices in their classrooms, in their schools, in their school settings, or in their workplaces, wherever you happen to be. I know that some of you are, or most of you are probably going to be from the Edmonton area, and some of you may be from very far away. And if that's the case, well then welcome to each one of you. I'm looking forward to you sharing your experiences with your colleagues and with me so that we all can be a learning community together. I think I've taught this course 4 times. I should have looked ahead of time before doing this, but I didn't. But I believe it's 4 times. And each time it's a different kind of learning experience because of the kinds of students that are in the class, the experience that they bring to the discussions, and the ways in which we share that knowledge so that we come away with a broader understanding of the very deep questions around gender in schools, in school organizations and school settings. I began, just a little bit about myself, I began my work as a teacher, an elementary teacher in London, Ontario. I taught there for a few years. I was quite young, I was very young actually, and at least it feels like that now. I decided that I would spread my wings a bit and move to Toronto, and I taught there for a few years as well. Both of those locations were wonderful places to learn more about what it means to be a teacher in a classroom, what kind of leadership one can provide to young children and children that are a bit older, as well as within my school context. I looked at the role of the principal, but that just wasn't something that I wished to pursue at that point. Later on, after having lived in the States for a while and having moved back to Canada and needing a job, I decided to look for a job in one of the schools. And when I first started teaching, believe it or not, if you had graduated from well, they weren't even called faculties of education then, they were called Teachers College. When you graduated from Teachers College and you were breathing, you were pretty well guaranteed a job if you had proven yourself through your program. And so, you know, I sort of assumed it had remained that way. It hadn't. There were no jobs available whatsoever I had moved back to London, and there were no jobs in London at all, despite the fact that one of my really close colleagues was in a position to not help me jump the queue, but at least tell me the kinds of opportunities that were around. There just wasn't anything. So as I pursued further, I talked to a friend whose husband was involved with First Nations schools, and she suggested that I apply. So I did. And like many Canadians, I knew next to nothing about the First Nations communities that were right outside my door, in the sense that they were right outside of the perimeter of London, Ontario. So at my first interview, it was a bomb. I was terrible. They asked me questions for which I had no knowledge whatsoever. and I deservedly did not get that job. I was interviewed again for another position in a community actually across the river from the first one, and I did get that job, and so began one of the most important learning opportunities that I've ever had in my life, and that was to learn about and become, to some degree at least, a part of a community that became very dear to me. I taught students from grades 4 through grade 6 over the period of time that I was there. And then after kind of establishing myself in the school and taking courses at the university to learn more about First Nations history, prepare myself better for the kinds of responsibilities that I had, because at that point I had become principal of the school through a set of circumstances. And then the Department of Indian Affairs decided that they were going to defund the schools and hand the funding over to the schools. So there was a whole different kind of structure. I had in the meantime applied for a sabbatical, and I had been accepted at Western. So I decided to go ahead with that, knowing that when I finished, I would pursue a job within that community again, because I really loved it and had a lot of very close friends actually in that community, I felt. And so I went off and I did my master's. And what I had become really interested in during my time at the school was the ways in which the work between the school itself in a First Nations community and the provincial school, the London, Ontario board, that we had a lot of interaction with, how those negotiations took place. And as in that last year as a principal of the school, I became very, very aware of the ways in which that worked and often didn't work very well. So I wanted to explore that in my master's thesis, and so I did. And by the time I had done that, and by the time I had taught at Western during the time that I was doing my master's, I had decided that maybe I needed to do a PhD as well, so that I could further understand this phenomenon of how power worked in organizations, particularly around issues of interactions between dominant cultures and non-dominant cultures, or dominant groups and non-dominant groups. So that's kind of the background of how I ever ended up doing the kind of work that I did. And so I went off to Toronto, continued teaching at Western. So I was back and forth between Toronto and London, and I had an opportunity to think about this more, because I decided to look at, because as a non-Aboriginal person, I was not in a position, I felt, practically and politically, particularly politically, to continue to do doctoral work within that community, or within a First Nations community. At the time, there were a lot of questions around non-Aboriginal people doing research in Aboriginal communities, and I was very sensitive to that, as the communities had every right to be as well. And so I decided that the experience that I had in terms of the larger question that I was looking at was questions of gender. And by that time I had become really interested in that topic because of work that I did with colleagues at Western, and particularly with a phenomenon I noticed each year I taught the course that I did at Western during my studies, and that was the whole unit that we did on gender equity policy, because at that point in Ontario there were very particular policies around equity. And when we came to the gender part, there was always this very kind of visceral reaction. And I found that kind of fascinating. So I decided that I would then look at this whole notion of resistance, because that's how I interpreted it, as a resistance to gender, and talking about gender as an equity issue, and particularly policy that worked to change those inequitable relationships. So that's what I did. And it was a really interesting process, because while I was doing my doctoral work, the policy environment changed entirely from a gender equity policy environment that was very open to equity initiatives, to one that completely shut those initiatives down when the Harris government came in Ontario. And so I was able to kind of map this trajectory and think through what were the conditions that opened up possibilities or closed them down. And from my perspective, this whole kind of conceptual framework had a way of thinking through how we might think through openness to what we might call the other, those who are part of a minority group, who are othered within our society. In other words, who experience stereotypical prejudice, etc. And so that's the kind of work that I did and continue to be interested in as I took up a position at Western, actually, initially as a professor. And then my children, I have 2 children, and they had, at that point, were grown, and one was in Vancouver and one was in Calgary, and they kept saying, "Mom, come west. It's really great in the west." So a position came open at the University of Alberta, and I was very happy at Western, so I had the enviable position of kind of going to my interview quite happy to be in either place, and so I ended up getting that position. And at the same time, my granddaughter was born, actually just the day before I did my interview day, so I was a little bit distracted, I'm afraid. But at any rate, I did get the job, came to Alberta, found it a fascinating experience, and learned more because I've been studying, educational systems across the country in many ways, but I really became much more intimately knowledgeable about the Edmonton system in particular, but the Alberta system and how it worked or didn't work, and mostly did work. It's an excellent system, filled with wonderful, caring, well educated teachers who are really concerned about their young people that they teach, and are well prepared to teach them. So that became a real joy, particularly as I became Associate Dean of undergraduate student services, was where I was located, and I was responsible for some of the program revisions that we were considering, as well as working with those teachers who were out and helping student teachers that were moving into the schools for their practicum, and also some of the teachers that were working with them in the schools. So that was a wonderful area of responsibility as well, that opened up all kinds of opportunities to get to know people at the ATA much better, at the provincial government much better, and so on. And I also worked on a committee looking at standards of practice for principals that eventually did become the standards that that principals work with and superintendents now work with throughout the province. So lots of good things happening, and so I do appreciate that period of time in my life very much. I did end up retiring, sort of, and I now live in Victoria, British Columbia, so that means that I'm a bit of a distance for many of you, but I'm certainly available by email. That's probably the first choice that people make. I'm available by phone or by Skype if that works better for you, and we can find a mutually agreeable time. And sometimes people even come for a coffee when they're, we get together for a coffee when they come to Victoria, because of course it's one of those places that people like to go to. So I'm lucky that way as well. I do feel fortunate as well that I haven't had to sever my ties completely with the university and with friends in Alberta because of my connection through this program and some of the work that I continue to do with some of my doctoral students. So that's a bit about me. You can find out more in my list of 10 things about me on the eClass website, just as a kind of fun way to introduce myself. But I hope this tells you a little bit more about me academically and the kind of work that I've done professionally as well, as a teacher and as a professor, and now as an instructor again in the MES program. I want to say that I do welcome your questions. I hope that you will feel free to get in touch with me if you have concerns about anything at all. and I'll do my best to find an answer for you. So never hesitate. And my advice is always to get in touch earlier rather than later, particularly if you find that you're getting behind with an assignment for legitimate reasons. We can generally work something out. My advice, of course, is not to get in that spot if it's at all possible because of the speed with which we go through the course. But nevertheless, I hope that you will always feel that you are welcome to do so, and we'll always try to come up with a solution that will work well. I also invite you to have a good look at the eClass website page. And what I'd like to do, because I know some of you are actually beginning the program in taking this course, or you may still not be familiar with some aspects of eClass. So I'd like to go through the eClass website with you so that you have a chance to see where things are for our course and kind of introduce you to some of the features of the page. So I'll do that right now. Okay, we're in the EDU597 eClass site, and here you'll find, of course, the title of the course, university that you're at, the name of our course is here, and also my name and contact information. So whenever you want to know what my email address is, you can just look on the eClass website and it will be there. The first thing that you'll see is 10 things to know about your instructor, plus course information, and you'll notice that it has a little tab thing here. That means that there are several different files inside that one space. So when you open this up, you will see all of them across here. The first is about your instructor, so 10 little things about me, about your online community, or learning community, and so some expectations in terms of the ways in which we interact with one another, particularly in a course that may elicit fairly strong opinions about things. And then some tips on accessing required readings. In most cases, you're going to be able to just hit the link and open it up. But if that doesn't happen, here are some other ideas that you may need to use. Hopefully you never have to. Okay, so let's go back to our site. And down here, of course, you'll see some of the breadcrumbs, or whatever they call them, that let you go to various places quickly. So if you wanted to change the module that you were looking at, for example, you could just hit that and it would take you down to where you wanted to go. But let's kind of go step by step. The other thing is over here we have library resources. Some of the things aren't going to be so necessary. A calendar to know where we are in the course, etc. All right. Once we get below the 10 things to know, there's also a video, the welcome, that you're actually watching, so you know about that. Getting to know each other form. I hope that all of you will click this and go in, and there's a little suggested format there, and you can put in some information about yourself. You can choose the 10 things to know about me format if you want, or you can just provide the information that's suggested. You will also find here the syllabus in color or black and white. And the reason for that is that you may not wish to print something in color, and or you may be colorblind and you may not be able to differentiate colors in the same way. And so something in color may not be as useful to you as something in black and white. Any announcements will go in here. I seldom use that. Mostly I send out emails to everybody. And so that says to you that you need to be aware of your U Alberta email account and be checking it regularly, preferably every day, although I certainly don't send things out every day. But particularly as the course gets going, there may be things that come up. Somebody asks a question and I realize that everybody should have this information, and I'll send out a quick notice to everybody to just provide that information to everyone so that we're all on the same page. There's also assignment information. So again, we see the tab, and when you open it up, you will see the description of the assignment and also the rubric that comes with that assignment. There's assignment 2, which is the reflection thread analysis, and we'll talk about these more as the course goes along. But again, you'll find the rubric and so on. So that's where we are that's where you'll look for information about the assignments. And of course, there's this information about the assignments in the syllabus as well. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Once you get past the assignment information, you will get to the part where you submit your assignment. And here is where you will open up the thread, and anytime you're going to submit something, you'll see this little hand with a paper in it. And that's your signal that that's where you will submit. And down here you will see there will be any information that you need to know. And then down here you will see add submission. I'm not going to click that because I'm not adding anything. But when you hit add submission, a thing will pop up and you'll be able to add your information there. And then we will go down into the modules. Now, the one thing that will be very different from this, what you're seeing now, to what you will actually see when you start the course, is that I don't have the module forums set up yet for groups. So if I were to open this up, it's not going to take me to a particular group of students, but that will happen by the time the course starts, because by that time our course list will be settled and so on. But in each case, there's going to be at least this kind of information. First of all, there will be the tab that you will open, and you will find part 1. And in module 1, it's set up a little bit differently. So there's part 1. I want you to do that first before you do anything else. So you go through and do these tasks, and then you will go to part 2. Then here you will find the required readings, and then here you will find the discussion forum information. That is the question that you'll respond to in the discussion forum. It's also in the forum, so you've got 2 places to find that information. But nevertheless, here you've got the steps that you'll follow in completing everything for Module 1. Module 2 is set up like a regular module in that we don't have Part 1 and Part 2. But again, you've got the module sections. So you've got instructor notes. So this will be just general information about the course or this particular module in the course. The required readings, this is very important. And here you'll see that we've got 4 readings. Now don't panic, because not everybody's going to read every reading. Now hopefully you'll have a chance to scan all of the readings, but you will be concentrating on one reading. And you will be responsible in the forum for reporting to your group about that one reading. And then your group will then respond to what your findings are about that reading. I've done it this way so that you have, first of all, access to a range of sources around a particular topic. I've also done it this way so that it's a more manageable task for you, because recognizing that many of you are working full-time as well as taking the course, I want you to have the breadth of knowledge that I hope that you'll gain from this course, but I want it to be manageable as well. So you may be assigned to read Bruner or Coleman or Coulter or Rosemeyer. You will read that carefully, and then you will do what it asks you to do in the forum. And then the rest of the readings, you'll just kind of have a chance to either, read the abstract and then maybe do a quick read through of the reading, but you don't have to have that same in-depth knowledge that you do for the reading that you've been assigned. So let's go back to our module, and you will also find a video, and you'll notice this in module 1 as well. Each one of the modules has a video that simply explicates general ideas, general points to be made about across the readings, so that this is an opportunity for you to get to know the ideas that are explored in each of the readings in a shortened version, obviously. And it gives you an opportunity to think about all of those ideas when you're doing the reading yourself, or the one that you've been assigned, so that you kind of know where it fits in the general discussion. I will also talk about any assignments that are coming up during that particular module, so that you'll have information beyond what's discussed in the actual discussion about the assignments above. So we have 4 topics. Understanding gender and its role in education will be the first one. Gender, power, organizations, and leadership. Male is a gender too, although we do look at some of the issues here in others as well. And then gender, leadership, intersectionality, and schooling. So this is where we think about gender as it intersects with race, class, ethnicity, and so on. And then the last one is one that I hope you'll begin to think about even in the first module. This is going to be a potpourri, you might call it, of readings that you are going to suggest. So I've got a few here in my list that might be of interest, that might be, around particular kinds of issues, but they might not be. But I'm going to ask you to give me an idea of the kinds of issues that you have particular interest in around issues of gender. And then I will look for readings and fill in the reading list. And then we will, you can do a pick and choose among the readings that are there and respond in the forum to that. So those are the 5 modules. There's some information here about course resources as well, APA, etc. And the course outline won't be there because it's in the syllabus above. And that's basically how it fits together. So I hope that's been helpful to you. And if you have any questions about this as well, please let me know. Again, welcome to the course. I'm looking forward to working with you and getting to know you better.